Before we get into it, I'm going to be doing a giveaway of one of these, so stick around to the end of the episode and I'll have more information on how you can enter. So I bought this bad boy to understand how it could work for me in a business context. But with this, I asked myself, how could I work productively? How do I do Zoom calls in VR and how will I do presentations? Well, I decided to challenge myself by spending an entire week in virtual reality so that I can answer all of these questions. I already knew I could bring my monitors into VR using an app called Immerse, but I hadn't really put it to the test. I wanted to learn what other things I could accomplish with the work that I do and what technical issues I might encounter in order to resolve them and be best prepared. So how this all came about was that a few years ago, before the beer flu epidemic happened, I was actually just what some might describe as a digital nomad. But I was traveling and I was working. But then I moved back to London to stay put while the world quite simply turned to shit. Since then, I've grown a bit attached to having a focused office space with a desk and most importantly, extra screens. 3 years later, in 2022, that's when this is being recorded, I recently got inspired to go traveling again, and a kind of small anxiety that I have was actually leaving some of these productivity comforts behind. But then I remembered I have this VR headset, and as I mentioned, the main reason I bought it was to experiment to see what I could do in a business and work context. So I thought there's no better time to test all of this stuff in the safety of my office when I'm not stranded on some desert island drinking from coconuts, because we know how awful that would be. So as I said, I have the Oculus Quest 2 128GB. I started the challenge with the original kind of head strap and we'll get into all that. But I also have these VR optician lenses inside, so I don't have to wear my glasses in VR, which gives me a wider field of view and just a little bit more comfortable, to be honest. So enough with the boring stuff, let's jump into what it was actually like working in VR. So day one, I spent the day coding in a React project, which I think really took advantage of having multiple screens. I kind of had Visual Studio in my main monitor, kind of a browser and research on the left-hand side, and the rendered output of my code on the right-hand side. Then I also had kind of Slack and my email open on the screen below. What I did find on day one is that my eyes and my head hurt a lot. I had to basically take breaks nearly every hour. But as with all things so far, I knew I just needed to kind of persevere and hope that eventually I'd kind of get used to it and the pain would disappear. And as I mentioned, the other thing was the head strap and the face mask that came with the headset. After using it for a long time, it looked like I'd been punched in the face. I had red marks all over. This prompted me to purchase the Kiwi head strap that I'd had my eye on for a while. I'll leave affiliate links to these in the description below. I bought this as well as their face mask, as I can't be dealing with having to explain myself about what all the red stuff was all over my face. So with some new items on the way, I continued to work through the day. Another aspect to this challenge that I learned is whether you consider it a good thing or a bad thing, is that people tend to not disturb you. Now, I don't mind being disturbed truthfully, but that was an interesting kind of side effect that I observed. Final note to make is that I had to leave my headset on charge all day. I had a cable extending from my USB dock that's on my desk and kind of plugged into my headset. So while I could be cable free for short bursts, I'd still have to make sure I was kind of charging for most of the day. Day two, I had to create a presentation in Keynote and do a little bit of designing in Protopie. Still waiting on my new strap, I decided not to spend as much time in VR as the sort of work I was doing didn't really require multiple screens. It's worth noting that I didn't feel as much eye pain on day two, but this could be that I was using it far less than day one. Maybe my body was getting used to this life, I don't know. During the day, this actually prompted a few discussions about people in VR. I would get comments like, it's not right and I want to live my life and I don't want to be isolated. But nor me, I can take it off and I can go spend time with my friends if I like, Often people spoke to me as if it was a kind of permanent choice, or it was one or the other. In my eyes, VR is a tool and I use it for certain experiences. I do realize it's not going to replace human contact, as do many people who choose to enjoy VR. And that's why I take it off. It sounds stupid to say that, but people just seem to not really get it. It's obviously early days yet for VR, and people are still coming to terms with it. So I do enjoy these debates and like hearing other people's opinions and perspectives, but most of the time they are just assuming, having never actually used it. My headstrap had arrived late on day 2, so I didn't really get a chance to use it. Day 3 was my chance, and it improved things dramatically. It was way more comfortable than the basic one that came with the Oculus, and the balance was better because it kind of hooked onto the back of my head. It was still leaving marks on my face, but as the day went on, I sort of learned to adjust it so that it was mostly balancing on the top of my head with lighter pressure around my face. Work-wise, I needed to do some video editing, which was disastrous. I think the graphical throughput that's needed for video really kills the headset. It was slow, it was sluggish. That, or it's just Final Cut Pro. I decided not to do that in VR and retreat to my usual setup. Up until now, I had escaped having to do any calls on Zoom. The way Zoom calls work in VR, assuming your guest doesn't have a headset, is that within Immersed, you can set up a virtual webcam where you can kind of move wherever you like, and it sort of shows a graphical version of yourself, and you can choose that as a camera input from within Zoom. Like I say, what they see is a graphical version of you. You can see your hands, and it tries to emulate what your voice is doing, like with your mouth moving. And they also see the scene. People actually really enjoyed it. I mean, I think it's a step better than just someone having a static photo of themselves. You know, it's at least a little bit animated. It's not as good as obviously having your camera on, but it was still a kind of good compromise, I think. On day 4, I had a couple of podcast recordings, and I actually do these at home where all my recording equipment is. Unfortunately, the first was cancelled, so I set about writing this script, which of course I did in VR. I had my dock out in front of me, my notes to the side, and then kind of media playing on the left. Then I had to create some YouTube thumbnails. Once again, the kind of graphical work slows down the connection with the VR headset, so I couldn't do that. But I prefer to do this stuff on my iPad anyway, so I continue to just create my thumbnails on my iPad. The day ended coincidentally with a podcast recording with Gravity Sketch founder Daniela Paredes. Which, if you haven't tried Gravity Sketch, it's an amazing VR 3D design tool. I'll leave a link to that episode when it's out. I don't think it will be out when this goes out, so bear with me on that one. Ultimately, it was just like another Zoom call, albeit being a little bit weird with a stranger, although I knew that Daniela was in this world and kind of well versed in VR. So I was kind of I was comfortable explaining that I was doing this challenge and that I'd be doing the podcast in VR. So that was quite fun. I guess the only issue was finding the mic. I kept on kind of bumping into it or whatever, but again, it was just kind of a funny experience while doing the podcast. Finally, Friday came, and by this point I wasn't experiencing any pain, any fatigue. I was kind of glad, to be honest, as I'll explain more in my summary. Besides, we've just started a new project which will be using, which will be a kind of website on this huge 55-inch touchscreen. So I had a bit of time coding in the morning in VR, but the rest of the day was spent setting the TV up. One aspect that I did play around with, which I thought was quite interesting, was actually the co-working space feature within Immersed. And this allows me to actually talk to people who are just working in different scenarios. I chose obviously a cafe here, but there were people around me on meetings, just chatting, but you can see people working here. That's another aspect which actually could add to the community aspect of working in VR, which I really enjoyed. So as I said, we're going to be giving away this fellow Carter Everywhere mug that's been engraved with my company's logo. So information on how to win is down below in the description. Good luck. So after spending a week in VR, I have to say I'm much more sold on the idea that I need productivity while I'm away, that I can get that from virtual reality and using specifically the Immersed app. With multiple screens, isolation creating focus, and no adverse side effects other than maybe looking a bit silly, I see it as a viable productivity machine. But unless you need multiple screens all of the time, I don't think it's something I can see myself spending every single day in VR. Zoom calls seem just absolutely overkill unless you're prone to using a virtual background to hide environment around you. It just seems too much of an ordeal to specifically go for a VR headset just for a call. What I didn't get a chance to do, and what I would love to do, is actually run a workshop with other people in VR. I think this is where VR really will shine. However, barely anyone has a VR headset to kind of test this with, unfortunately. Hypothetically speaking though, I've been experimenting with other apps, and some that show promise are Arthur, Meet in VR, Spatial, and even Horizon Workrooms. I have set up my own office in Arthur, which I could bring people in to present, and I also wanted to present in Spatial, but I can't get my presentation like up on a screen and have my notes out in front of me, and that's kind of really important unless I memorize the presentation itself, which could be an option, but oftentimes you need those notes to do the presentation. The closest I could get was having kind of 2 PDFs, one on the wall and one on the notes in front of me, and every time I would change the slide on the presentation, I'd have to change the slide on the pad in front of me. And I think that was using Spatial or something. I'll leave a comment around that. Of course, I lose animations when I'm doing presentations. If you have any thoughts about how you would do this in VR, do let me know in the comments, because I'm racking my brains trying to figure out how I would present in VR. Overall, collaborative work seems really promising in VR and what I'm really excited about. But where productivity in VR really shines for me at the moment is in solo mode and working with multiple screens. I was actually able to get more work done with more screens and focus. I just want to end by saying that over on my Full Stack Agency Discord, we have a VR and Metaverse channel. So I'll leave a link in the description below to that free Discord server. So that'll do it for this episode. I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments. Would you use VR for work and productivity? And what apps do you use that help you get work done in VR, either like on your own or with a group of people? I'm not stopping with my quest to be more productive in VR, so I genuinely want to know your tips. Do leave them below. So if you did want to win one of these fellow Carter Everywhere mugs, then the information is down below in the description. So once again, thank you so much for sticking around to the end. Make sure you like and subscribe, or join me on my free Discord. And until the next one, I'll see you soon.